Tansi, are you unmuted, Trish?
Yes, I am.
Tansi, Miyo Takosin, hello, good evening. My name is Sakawis, also Christine Novus, and I'm Plains Cree Saulteaux of the George Gordon First Nation, and I am founder and decolonizer with Great Plains Action Society. And we are doing a thing today on Inauguration Day to get out perspectives of Indigenous folks, particularly in Iowa and Nebraska, about what's happening, what has happened, and what we want to see happening in the next 4 years, but particularly in the next 100 days with this new administration. And I would like to acknowledge the land that we are inhabiting right now that was stolen, and that belonged or wouldn't belong, but it was the ancestral lands of the Iowa, the Kickapoo, the Dakota, Winnebago, Omaha, and so many more tribes between the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers. And of course, there's going to be people calling in from other parts of the country, but mostly everybody here today is from Iowa and Nebraska, actually. And I would like to pass it over to Trish to introduce what we are doing.
Hok Janapi, Hijakishna, Hini Katagiwina, Hochuk Rajada, Chakshakuinga, Higa Dana, Micah Day, Trisha Etringer. Good evening. I just introduced myself in my ancestors' language, the Ho-Chunk language. I want to excuse myself in front of my elders for what I talk about tonight. I do not mean to offend or give ill intentions because I'm still learning. What I said was good evening. I greet you all. My Ho-Chunk name is Chakshep Goinga, and my English name is Trisha Etringer. My Ho-Chunk name means eagle that returns. I am a tribal member of the Ho-Chunk Nation. I currently reside in the tri-state metro area known as Sioux City, Iowa. And this is where Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota connect. I work as the Director of Operations for Great Plains Action Society, alongside here with the founder of Great Plains Action Society, my friend Sakawis. We are so happy that you could join us tonight during our Inaugurate Change broadcast. We want to be perfectly clear that we are thrilled to see the end of Trump's tyrant era, but this doesn't change much. This system was already built on the strength of a doctrine that enslaved and murdered people of color. The same doctrine was then written into the US Constitution, which are now written into laws. Laws which change into procedures that now give protection and power to white supremacy and racism. Let us not forget that this system was created without us in mind. It hasn't changed. This is why we would never look down upon uprisings nor ignore our Indigenous candidates seeking public elected positions who demand to sit at the table. We are called to take action in whatever resonates with us. Tonight, we are kicking off our start to the first 100 Days of Change campaign. In this campaign, we are putting pressure on the Biden-Harris administration to stay committed to what their plans of promise have laid out. In their Tribal Nation plan, Biden promises to address climate change, MMIW, which is murdered and missing Indigenous women. I like to use MMIR because our men and children also need to be included in that. MMIR is missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. IHS, housing, and other issues that have been ignored in the past. Over the next coming months, we will highlight portions of the Tribal Nation plan on a weekly basis, so make sure you stay tuned in. You can like, subscribe, and share our content on IG, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, and Twitter. Please visit our website at greatplainsaction.org to get connected right now. I'd like to take it over to Sakawis right now.
Thank you so much, Trish. So that is why we are doing these 100 days of Biden. As Indigenous people, we have inherent distrust of a system that was never set up for us. It wasn't set up at all for our success in any way whatsoever, which is actually why we founded Riverland Native Voter Project, which is like our overarching political engagement program that all of our political engagement and GOTV, which is Get Out the Vote work, is done through. And Trisha and I have been working on this for a few years now, actually, building this platform up, particularly for folks in Iowa and Nebraska and the Midwest, because, you know, you don't see a lot of that happening here, just because numbers are, you know, smaller, and technically Iowa isn't, you know, Indian country, right? But it is, because everything is Indian country. It's all stolen land. And, you know, I understand why people don't want to participate in the system. And I'm one of those people, actually. You know, I've never really voted. I'm, you know, Canadian. I never voted in Canada. And of course, I can't vote here. But, you know, these past few years, I saw the need to do so, you know, particularly in a case like this and what happened. And I realized that we actually can infiltrate the system, and we can make a difference that way. I don't feel like we are participating in a colonial act. I do think that the more Indigenous people that get involved in politics, the greater our chances are of making real and lasting change that benefits not just Indigenous people, but all BIPOC, women, you know, LGBTQIA, and oppressed peoples of this country. So, you know, our way is, sorry to say, but I think our way is the way. Our ideologies were a threat to colonial settlers and invaders throughout the world, which is the reason why Indigenous peoples have been so heavily genocided and colonized, because the way of thinking is just completely opposite from a colonial capitalist way of thinking. You know, so like, and what happened these past few years with this particular administration was that it wasn't that these thoughts and these ideologies aren't there and present all the time. It's just that they're shrouded in, you know, whatever type of, you know, liberal or progressive movement might be taking center stage at the moment. But the reality of the situation is that people are still facing, you know, great threats. You know, we have the highest levels of missing and murdered people in this country as Indigenous people. We have, you know, depending on the year, the highest rate of police murder rates. We have, you know, the highest rates of, you know, certain sicknesses like diabetes and heart disease, and you know, youth suicide rates. You know, 90% of our people will be you know, terrorized, you know, physically assaulted by a non-tribal member in their lifetime. Those are really shocking numbers. You know, and, you know, I'm just throwing statistics out there, and I know that happens a lot, but it's always important so that people can remember those statistics, because those statistics aren't heard very much in settler descendant media. So it's like, it's highly important that we keep, you know, blasting that out there, because we need people to start making legislation that matters to us. And actually is made by us as well. You know, we are making our way in Congress. We have, you know, 3 Indigenous women in there now. And we have all sorts of people running all over the country right now for different levels of office. And, you know, like I said, there are people that don't want to participate in the system, and I understand that. But there are people that do, and though there are many different ways to basically dismantle colonial capitalist structures and then rebuild in a better way, you know, for all of us. I often talk about an Indigenous-led regenerative economy, and that's my, you know, my goal as I work my way through my life and my work, which is one and the same, to make a better world, you know, for not just myself, but my children and my children's children, and all of my relatives. So, you know, that's the goal. And we can only get there by allowing Indigenous people's, you know, voices to be heard. Trish, do you have something you'd like to talk about in terms of voting?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Sakawas. Yeah, so over the past 6 months, I've had the opportunity to work with Vote Mob. Vote Mob is not an organization, but a collective of youth from across the United States. Their mission is to get out the progressive vote through fun, creative, and disruptive ways. And also create long-term partnerships with grassroots organizations that extend way beyond the election day. This was the first time I ever thought about the political system. However, I like to be open-minded, so I stepped into the political world, and here's what I learned. Voter suppression is real. Voter suppression is an attempt to silence your vote. This can look as simple as not accepting a tribal ID for providing some kind of information. It limits your access to casting your vote. This year was an exceptionally challenging amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump's administration went as far as shutting down post offices in rural areas around the time of the election. Being that there was a pandemic going on, he made an attempt to suppress voters by taking away the option of mail-in ballots. Thus, people would need to go to a polling place nearby. For Natives, this can be quite the feat. We may have to miss work to go stand in a long line for hours. Some Natives don't have transportation like that. Childcare is another thing. And some simply just can't afford missing work like that. So therefore they feel like they can't make it to go vote. A lot of Native families live together too under one roof. You got your aunties and your uncles living along with all your cousins. Why? Well, the old saying, it says it takes a village to raise a child. Many families live together now too. I mean, if I shouldn't say now, this has always been a thing, because they can sustain themselves better if everyone is helping financially. When it comes to voting, you are asked to provide a current home address that you reside in, and many fear that if they reveal this information, they're going to get cut off from financial assistance. Another form of voter suppression is not allowing individuals who have felonies. I don't call them felons because, you know what, that's dehumanizing for one. I think it's dehumanizing. These are people that have made maybe some bad mistakes, and some people that just got hemmed up into this system. So this is not fair because the public education preps our youth for the prison system. The prison system targets people of color. Thus, if Indigenous folks wanted to vote, this would make it almost impossible for them to do it if they got hemmed up into the system. We are reprimanded for an action that may have occurred while we were 18, 19, 20 years old. The human brain doesn't fully develop until we are 25 years old. In most states, there are ways for an individual who has a criminal record to restore their voting rights, but stipulations vary from state to state. Voting is a part of the system. Yes, voting is part of the system. However, if we are not engaging in it, we are allowing politicians who do not represent us to sit at the big table and decide for us what we think should happen. What I found was that the more and more Indigenous candidates getting elected into public offices, they are able to speak up on issues that do affect our communities. They are in there to demand Indigenous voices to be heard, and even in a space where that's not welcomed. We did not become U.S. citizens on our stolen homelands until the Snyder Act passed in 1925. 1925. We did not become U.S. citizens until that time. We didn't get the right to vote until 40 years after that. And that was all in 50 states. So we have the right to vote, so why not use it? I want to thank everyone for joining the live stream tonight, and our next guest is Keely. I will let her introduce herself. Keely, if you can give us your pronouns, your title, and however you would like to be introduced as.
Thank you. Ho, Jagimawekwa Netishis, Keely Driscoll Netishis and Mukamani Swan. My name is Jagimawekwa. My English name is Keely Driscoll. I'm 20 years old. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am Meskwaki with ties to the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. I'm currently attending the University of Iowa, majoring in international studies with certificates in sustainability and Native studies. And I'm hoping to go on to law school, but for now I am working at the Native Center for Behavioral Health here at the College of Public Health. And I'm also currently in transition from working closely with VoteMob to shifting to work more closely with Great Plains Action Society. So today I'm going to be focusing on Big Ag, Iowa's Environment and Sustainability. And first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to Great Plains for creating today into the first step in our 100-day campaign to hold the upcoming administration accountable. I know Vote Mob, Great Plains, and we all have worked really hard this last year to get out the vote and support this administration. And I'm glad we did after the threat to our democracy that we all witnessed earlier this month. I feel grateful that today we are welcoming an administration that's willing to uphold that democracy and work to support us. So I think Senator Nina Turner said it perfectly earlier today in that the plan that the Biden-Harris administration has laid out for us is simply a stepping block into the change that we will push for collectively. Because right now our current reality is that over 70 million Americans voted and chose to support the previous administration that denies the existence of climate change in this last election, and whether that be because they aren't educated about the risks or otherwise. This is what I have to speak for today, of a troubling reality and experience that Americans have faced over the past 4 years in contradictions being made between the 45th and climate scientists, of whom express our situation as already surpassing the opportunity to implement preventative measures to completely mitigate the effects of the climate crisis. And so this is really troubling when we see how melting sea ice and permafrost is already affecting Alaskan communities today, which make up 40% of federally recognized tribes here in the United States. So it's very necessary that the Biden-Harris administration fulfill their promises to tribal nations in working to restore tribal lands, address climate change, and safeguard natural and cultural resources by working with tribal nations and incorporating traditional ecological knowledge into measures that are set to defend our most vulnerable tribal lands and communities from the effects of climate change. And so here in Iowa, roughly 98% of Iowa has been altered for agricultural use, cities, and roads. And so that means the 97% of soybeans and 95% of corn grown here in Iowa from biotech seeds is really prevalent. And for our indigenous communities here in Iowa specifically, that's a threat to diversity of crops, to our traditional corn. And so now, that we're looking back on the last 4 years, over the 100 environmental protection acts were reversed in regards to water, toxic substances, air pollution, animals, and a lot more. And they were revoked with the last administration. So it will take time to recover and to get back to where we were before. And so in the next 100 days, we have to, as Iowans, and as individuals, organize and regroup and, start to voice what's necessary for our own communities and for the survival of our future generations. The Biden-Harris administration is not only promising to support tribal efforts in terms of renewable energy, but to protect BIPOC populations in the farming industries. This means that they're going to shift into supporting more smaller sized farms. And, we've seen in the last year farmers across America working with the National Sustainable Agricultural Coalition to Congress and telling them how dire climate action is for rural communities. And so though the plan set out by the next administration does sound broad and really overwhelming, there's a huge push within to localize. And that's where our efforts are going to come in. So rather than simply accepting their goal to support smaller farms and production, we now have the opportunity here to push even a step further to address monopolies present in agriculture across the Midwest. Or from a sustainability standpoint, to address animal agricultural industry and the unprecedented amount of emissions that are coming from that, and how unsustainable that system is in itself. And we also have the ability to even question the interests of those who are advising this administration on these plans. But most importantly of all, like, we need to work as a collective, and our collectives need to work as collectives to ensure that those that are most affected by these policies are heard. And so once again, thank you so much to Great Plains Action for having me, and thank you to Vote Mob.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing with us, Keely. I enjoyed working with you with Vote Mob too when we did our Vote Mob work. So next up we're waiting for Danielle, but we ran into some technical difficulties. So Aydan is on, so let's put Aydan up, and Aydan is going to present youth perspectives moving into 2021. And excuse me, I also got to meet Aydan during Vote Mob during the Vote Mob thing. So Aydan, go ahead and introduce yourself, pronouns, and any titles that you see fit.
So my name is Kanesa. Aydan is my English name. He, she, or excuse me, he, him, and his pronouns. I come from the Amatma Manewak Menominee people of the Eagle clan, and I was born to the Zuni clan of the Navajo Edgewater people. Technically speaking, my maternal grandfather's clan is European American, and my paternal grandmother's clan is a Bitterwater people of the Diné people. So I come from a lot of different cultural background, if you will. It's the southwest region as well as the Midwest region, and they're two very different cultures. But one thing that has remained the same from both of my parents' upbringings has been my understanding and awareness of what I am bringing to the table, how important I am in the grand scheme of things. I'm going to talk a little bit differently here from my point of view. I have completed the automotive training so I've been an automotive technician for about 6 years now in the Iowa City, Cedar Rapids area. And one thing I figured out very quickly is that there are not a lot of people like me. And when I say that, I mean, well, especially people of color, but it's crazy how, my light complexion actually kind of blends me in, and I get to see how a lot of these guys actually behave. Before the current administration, everything was cool. Everything was gravy. If there was political talk, it stayed to who it needed to stay to. And all of a sudden we get this new radical leader, and, everyone thinks they can just say what they want. All filters went away. People started saying some really hateful things. And these were people that I looked up to. These were people that, taught me what I know to get me where I am today. And to hear those kind of things has been really difficult. It's been hard for me to hear racist comments and hear things that do not include the majority of society, to hear viewpoints spoken as if it's the only one, and really it's just the white majority. And, to give some example, these are people that have grown up in one small town, and they don't have the experience I have. They don't know all the people I knew growing up. And I feel like as an Indigenous youth, I kind of carry that chip on my shoulder. I find it hard to hear these hateful things from people that are so caring and can put such a great smile on, and they turn around and you hear them say something so awful and so disgusting. And it, for me, it's been difficult, and I won't lie, it's gotten me in trouble. And it actually was part of the reason why I got, kicked out from my last job. Granted, it was COVID that was the real reason, but when you can't talk about things the way you need to talk about them, it can seem disruptive. If you're the one minority who sees things as, all is equal and everyone should have an opportunity to live and work and do all those things, and to be against such a heavily deep wired, hatred, and it's just such an old school thought process. And so what I've learned is that you really got to choose your words. And the biggest thing especially is you got to watch your emotions, because some of these things these people say, it's just so awful. It's like, I never thought I could be triggered so quickly by someone's words that have nothing to do with me, words that don't affect me at the end of the day. And to get so upset as to get into someone's face about it, it has kind of humbled me. I've put my own foot in my mouth trying to stand up for what I believe in. So, even disregarding the new administration coming in, I think the biggest thing that we can do as Indigenous youth and as Indigenous community in general is to try to stay focused on community building, coming together. I think that there's some of us that have seen what's been going on and really understand it for what it is. And then there's the rest of us who are being, poisoned and washed and stuff. And so my biggest message is to make sure we're staying on topic with the narrative of bringing people together, to not worry about what's over here and what's over here, but what's here in the middle. And so far it's been difficult, but it has worked. It's been useful. So.
Right on, Aydan. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. We got a hold of Danielle. So thank you very much, Aydan. Our next guest is Danielle, and she's going to talk about the Dakota Access Pipeline and the current climate crisis. Hi, Danielle. Go ahead and introduce yourselves, pronouns, and any titles that you see fit.
My name's Danielle Wanatee. I'm Meskwaki. I'm a member of the Sac and Fox of the Mississippi and Iowa tribe. I'm also an Iowan, and I'm referred to as she and by my Meskwaki name, which is Biweni. So, today President Biden signed an executive order stopping the Keystone XL pipeline, and so that lets me know that justice is at work, because when this all started and all energy transfer partners started telling us what they were going to do, I was listening to everything that they said and trying to remember everything they said to hold them accountable. And when they didn't keep their word on some of the things, like the Dakota Access Pipeline getting their permits before they started construction, using eminent domain for private gain, when they were claiming a public utility company. Well, none of that oil was geared towards citizen use. It was all earmarked to be exported out of the United States. So when we started going to meetings, listening to energy transfer partners tell of all their things that they wanted to do, I made sure to keep in mind what their plan was and realizing that there was something else going on. If we all have to have permits and insurance to do things, they should be held accountable also. So now what Biden is doing, this isn't about being friends with Canada or economic development like that. What they had promised us was not using China or Russia steel, and that's what they used. They promised using our in-state union workers for this pipeline. They didn't do that. They bust people in from out of state. And so that's something we have to hold them accountable to. But one thing we also have to do is keep talking to each other and letting them know the only way this kind of stuff happens if they become aware of what bothers the most disenfranchised people of the United States, which is most likely the Black and brown people of the United States. And if the water goes bad, those are the first communities that are going to be impacted by undrinkable water. Now we look at Flint, Michigan, and the elected officials there are being held accountable. So those kind of things is what's coming to the people who made these decisions for the citizens of the United States and the states that are here. When he had signed the executive order, it kind of gave me hope that all our work, all the water protectors work, everybody that came to Standing Rock over all those months, when the youth put the call out for everybody to come, when we put the call out for the veterans, everybody that showed up, all your hard work culminated to this, him signing the executive order. You guys spoke up, he heard, everybody heard you, everybody's aware of it. Now they're saying it on mainstream media news, and that's a big impact. But we have to also remember that these people that were opposed to everything that we were doing, we also fight for water for them and the protection of our water. Because that doesn't just affect people who drink it, it also affects farmers, it also affects agriculture. And that's something that we have to be aware of, because farmers matter too, not just in Iowa, but all through our United States. And I hope that this new administration allows Indigenous people to sit at the table at every conversation and let us have our voices be heard and our ideas implemented in some of these laws and things that need to be changed for the better for everyone. I remember going to these things and wondering how our elected officials could make these decisions for the rest of us. It kind of hurt my heart at the time, because at the time I didn't have no grandchildren, but now I have 2 grandchildren, and that's what I think about. I don't think about me right now, I think about the future generations. And this is a good step forward. Now we have to build on the momentum and keep it going. Don't stop. This is we've turned things, we were at a tipping point. And on January 6th, I think that tipped it. We needed that in order to tip it to the good. Because even our enemies, we have to defend and we worry about. Even in times of war, we allow them to come get their wounded. But right now, those wounded people are still our United States citizens, which are most likely Trump supporters. So we still have to work with them. And this is going to be, it isn't going to be as tough as it was the last 4 years. At least with this administration, we can work with them and they'd be willing to listen to us. So I need the youth to keep speaking up what they want, what they need, what they want for their future. And we will help you do whatever we can, just like our elders did for us in the 60s and 70s, trying to get some things changed for equal rights and equal justice for everybody. And this is one step forward that we need. Just like the youth said before me, we need to do this for them and listen to what they have to say. And we can do this together. I mean, it's not that hard, but we have to keep having this dialogue and the conversation open with each other, and just care about your opponent or your enemy or whatever you want to call them, but we're all human beings. And just remember to keep holding them accountable. Go to the meetings, go to all the hearings, all that stuff, and make sure you write this stuff down and remember. And I don't know.
Yeah, no, thank you, Danielle. That was really powerful because, yeah, it's been 4 years. It's been 4 years since Trump signed his executive order that streamlined all these fossil fuel extractive projects. And I just want to shout out to all of the water protectors, all of the black snake killers, everybody that really does the work. It's not easy. It's not easy to get followed by the feds. It's not easy to have reports, false reports of, being an eco-terrorist. That's not what it is. We're protecting the water. We're protecting the land, because they're obviously not going to do it. And somebody's got to stand up and say that. And I think it is powerful that it is the youth that has done that. So, Danielle, yeah, go ahead.
We also have to remember that this also affects murdered and missing Indigenous women. Without these pipelines and the man camps, we wouldn't have a lot of Indigenous women from the Dakotas that are going missing and everybody along the pipeline. I remember an instance we were running in Iowa and we had people that would drive by us and yell, at the children we were running with. So,
Yep. Thank you, Danielle, for your time. We will reconnect too. I cannot wait. The pandemic has been so long, and I'm so happy that you got through the pandemic. And I know you suffered with COVID-19. I'm so happy to see you today. You look great. So, all right, Christine, we are going to take it over to Ronnie. Ronnie has commitments tonight. So he was so gracious to do our pre-recording, and he is going to present on the withering of the police state. So Christine Ursakowicz, whenever you're ready.
Hello everyone, my name is Ronnie James and I organize with Great Plains Action Society as well as Des Moines Mutual Aid. I would like to speak briefly on the concepts of defunding the police and the longer-term goal of police abolition. Earlier today, Joe Biden said at the inauguration that this new administration will be caring about the peaceful transfer of power as we have for 2 centuries. While this new administration will likely be an incremental improvement to the previous in a lot of ways, it is also a return to the status quo of the last 2 centuries. The status quo has always included a justice system that has targeted, exploited, and destroyed Black, brown, and poor communities. This legacy began with Indian hunters and slave patrols and progressed to the modern prison industrial complex, which Biden was a zealous architect of, and was fed by the always expanding and adapting policies of attorney generals and prosecutors like Kamala Harris. We have no reason to believe that this administration has any intention of decreasing power to the armed forces patrolling our streets. There may be cosmetic reforms, possibly even some increased sensitivity training, but we as the people cannot expect a call to the authorities for help during a crisis will be any less dangerous than it was a year ago or 100 years ago. As bleak as this is, there is a significant amount of resistance and hope to change the situation. We stand on the shoulders of giants who have been doing this work for centuries. In the bleakest of times, as well as the euphoria of short-term gains, we have to remember that in the end we have each other. The apologists will insist that the role of law enforcement is to keep our communities safe. In contrast, the only way we can keep our communities safe is to safeguard them ourselves. Simplified, this means that instead of calling in armed agents of the state to mediate our conflicts, we will need to replace the police with organized community response. It has become too common for communities to suffer loss and trauma when the police are those that respond to situations like a mental health crisis or a property dispute. These are situations that can be solved by those involved with it, and we can work amongst ourselves to solve them together. A community, by definition, is built on the relationships between its members. 99% of our conflicts can be solved by those affected by them, but only with the support of those around them. Anytime we call on the police and the monopoly on violence that comes with them, we are risking ourselves or loved ones from being hurt or worse. Many communities practice this work already. The events of this past summer has popularized defund the police and abolitionist concepts. This can make some of the work somewhat easier as we move forward. Some of this work will need to be on the political stage. We can lobby and vote to have police resources diverted to less dangerous organizations, but typically, these new organizations will still be working for the same state and class that have dispossessed and repressed us for centuries. Additionally, by the very nature of centralized power, every election has the ability to reverse any policy gain we may win. So some of this fight will be in the government offices, but the majority of it will be us in our communities. Many communities work to train amongst themselves mental and physical health workers, conflict mediators, and anything else we may need. We each have skills and resources we can utilize towards abolition. Some of us can navigate the halls of the system to make short-term change there. Others have skills that produce food, provide medical care, or care for our precious youth and elders. Some are skilled in the more confrontational tactics that are needed. But the more we replace the police and the state in general with community-centered organizing, the safer we will be and the more control of our future we will have. Once we envision that world our ancestors want for us, finding our role is going to be natural. A very wise person once said, "The disappearance of a sense of responsibility is the most far-reaching consequence of submission to authority." So if we are to survive, and importantly thrive, we know what we will have to do. All power to the people.
I love Ronnie when he talks. Ronnie is awesome. He's going to college and he does a lot of work with DSM Mutual Aid. He's just really amazing. He's awesome. He's one of our guys that we can just go to and like.
He's our brother.
Yeah. So shout out to Ronnie. And DSM Mutual Aid, and so I'm gonna talk a little bit about COVID-19 and IHS service, or IHS if nobody knows what that means, Indian Health Services in urban areas. So since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, families from all over the world have suffered great losses from loved ones to a sense of security. I currently reside in the Siouxland area where Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota meet. So far, state governors Kim Reynolds, Pete Ricketts, and Kristi Noem have been notoriously known as irresponsible leaders in response and preparation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds did not come to the family's side when Waterloo Tyson plant supervisors were under investigation for placing bets on how many of their workers would get COVID-19, which was then later found to be true, that they were placing bets. Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts released a statement to the public just weeks ago that immigrants would not receive COVID-19 vaccines. And then what else was there? Gosh, there's so many things. South Dakota, Kristi Noem even allowed Trump's pageantry 4th of July celebration in her home state, where Trumpsters came not wearing masks and social distancing. Mind you, that was in the Black Hills. The Black Hills it's all stolen land, but that's just shout out to all the people that did show up that day in resistance. You guys did an awesome job. Kind of shutting it down. You didn't shut it down all the way, but it was you made it very
as much as you can, being a brown and black.
No, they definitely put up a fight for that. So
we can't get into the Capitol building.
I know. I'm just like we're not. Yeah, exactly. So as I mentioned, I live in Sioux City, Iowa. Sioux City is such a diverse community, which it has a high population of urban natives, Latinos, and immigrants. I hate using those words, to be honest, immigrants. It's just not, it doesn't sit well with me. So
they're indigenous.
Yes, we're all indigenous to the land. So it is also embedded with meatpacking plants and other agricultural factories. Most of the workforce for these factories come from these communities. When the pandemic hit, little was done to offer any financial assistance to the workers and their families. Work conditions were really horrible. Reported work conditions was they were able to use one mask a shift, and it's really hard work. You get sweaty, you're trying to, pull your mask away. No social distancing whatsoever. And it was just, it was hard to hear about these conditions. So me being here and working with Great Plains Action Society, we know that the urban native population too is at risk. They have high rates of diabetes, cancer, and just all kinds of health disparities. And we do not have IHS here. We do not have Indian Hospital here in the urban native center or urban native population or in Sioux City. So it was scary because we didn't know what was going to happen in Sioux City for our urban natives and Latinos and the immigrant communities. So we had put together a fundraiser in hopes of raising some money for basic PPE items and hygiene. And we were able to provide some of those things to our communities. So the Biden-Harris plan pretty much basically promises that they are going to start implementing IHS services, that there's going to be health coverage for natives, specifically, I think, with the Affordable Care Act. I think they were able to raise the uninsured rate to 33% more to get enrolled with and have health coverage. And I think that's so important because from the sense of, the dawn of colonization, we've been promised all these things and they're not materializing, and they've never just, every treaty has been broken. So I know Christine has helped me out too, as far as, kind of looking at the scope of things. So Christine, I know you live in Iowa City too. So you can definitely relate. And especially in a place where there isn't a high population of Native Americans, so to speak.
Yeah. Are you asking me to respond?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Right.
You mean my thoughts on COVID in Iowa?
Yeah. So basically, so we have the pandemic, and we know that urban natives have a high rate of health disparities. And this is just something overall, the COVID-19 response has been just a joke for the past, year. So with Biden Harris, like, what would you like to see in 2021?
Oh my goodness. Well, right now, I mean, it's unbelievable to me that the governor of Nebraska is waffling on whether or not to give vaccines to unregistered people. So these people are working in indentured servitude, and they are working in the factory. They're working in the big ag industry, like big ag agribusiness. So they're working in CAFOs, concentrated animal feed operations. They're working in the fields. They're working in the meat packing plants. And these are not sanitary places, first and foremost, like really ever, because the industry is so lax here. And there's like an ag gag, so people can't actually get the truth out there. So people just do kind of whatever they want. It's really disgusting, actually. And so a lot of people continue to stay in these jobs because they have to. And of course, colonial capitalist tendencies obviously take advantage of these people. And so for me, that's a really big deal. Just because somebody isn't registered here doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to healthcare. The richest, this is like considered the richest country in the world. I don't know if technically if it is anymore, but they have a responsibility to help people.
Right. And then media too, or like they don't disclose their numbers too, as far as like meat packing plants. And I feel like if they were, that like they need to be doing that, obviously. There's a whole other side that we just don't even see. I think that would have been very interesting to see, because of the fact that the numbers would have been more dramatic. I believe in my heart that it would have been more dramatic, and maybe there would have been a more of just a response overall from human beings in general, like human beings that are put at risk. What's
disturbing is that Reynolds put a cap on what is considered an outbreak. So it has to be more than 10% of the population of employees in a place. So what happens when you have like thousands of employees? That's a massive outbreak, but it's not even reported if it's under 10%. And that's actually what happened in Iowa in quite a few places, and it's really disturbing.
Yep. So thank you very much. I just wanted to kind of touch on the COVID-19. We still have the fundraiser up. If you want to go, it's at greatplainsaction.org/UNE COVID-19. That's up. We have some of pictures and just some storytelling. We are still trying to help the Siouxland area as well. So we're going to hopefully extend it into a kind of a mutual aid project. So that's the long-term goal for that. So next guest is Jessica Engelking, and she is going to be presenting on racist holidays and Native American Heritage Month. Jessica, thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you, Trish.
Alongside with us, and yeah, she's funny. I love her. Go ahead and introduce yourself, your pronouns, and any titles that you feel fit.
Okay. Hi, my name's Jessica. She, her pronouns. I am White Earth Ojibwe, and I'm currently living in northeastern Iowa. And I am here to talk a little bit about racist holidays and Native American Heritage Month and what happened to it. So as part of our project to hold the incoming administration accountable, I'm here to talk about racist holidays and Native American Heritage Month. So in order to truly address the white supremacy problem in this country, we have to get to the racist roots. When we actively celebrate whitewashed myths, we stand in the way of truth. So what I hope to do is get across the importance of taking these things like holidays seriously. I can understand how people are like, what's the big deal? It's a holiday, it's a day, what does it matter? But I want to say these things are important because what it is doing is taking control and advancing a particular narrative, and a narrative that's harmful to us. So since 1990, November has been Native American Heritage Month, and a lot of hard work went into that, and it's really important that we had a month that acknowledges us. So this past fall, Trump issued a proclamation declaring November 2020 National American History and Founders Month. I strongly encourage people to read this proclamation. It's in the White House archives. It's really bad. You should read it. And so it's not just that it's rude to try to steal our month. It's that what the language in this proclamation does is directly contradict the truth, and it contributes to our erasure. And so while I don't particularly, I think it's important that we. Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh no, yeah, we can hear you. Your camera just went. Yeah, it's okay.
I think it's important that we hear, at least the speechwriter's own words about what they're saying. So in the proclamation, it says, "This is the inheritance of today's generation of Americans, a history defined by righteous struggle in service to our founding ideals of liberty and justice for all. A history populated by heroes and warriors for freedom, and a history marked by an unyielding commitment to virtue and principle. This history is what distinguished our nation as the most free and just society in the world." So clearly they're taking history very important. And then as such, I think it's important that we take history important as well. So in that proclamation, Trump goes on to directly attack attempts at correcting whitewash history. So he talks about critical race theory, and he says adherence to critical race theory and other associated ideologies believe that America is an inherently racist and sexist country, defined by oppression and hierarchies of victims. He goes on to say, "That is why I recently signed an executive order that bans executive departments and agencies and federal contractors from teaching critical race theory in an effort to prevent the indoctrination of the American people by these dangerous ideology to forge an even brighter future of our nation by preserving its past." And so we had a president that was using his executive authority to explicitly say, you can't teach, this, corrected view of history. And that's extremely problematic. I mean, people got all up in arms when, he couldn't tweet anymore saying free speech, but he used his executive power to say, you cannot teach, these ideologies that challenge the white supremacist myths. I think it's important that we recognize this urgency because, reading this proclamation, they see of, maintaining control of this narrative, of a narrative that describes America as, this young, courageous, scrappy nation, founded on all these virtuous principles, and not, acknowledging the deeper, darker history of, colonial exploitation and slavery. So Trump ended his proclamation by listing the date as being, in the year of the independence of the United States of America, the 245th. And so that's doing something there. It is emphasizing that the United States of America is only 255 years old, because this assertion flies directly in the face of efforts to seek justice and reconciliation for wrongs that date back much farther than that. I mean, if you consider the following two propositions: the indigenous peoples of what is now the United States of America have experienced colonial violence for at least 400 years. And that's, a very modest number. And then also, the U.S. is exactly 200, a large chunk of history that's unaccounted for. And that's what we need to be doing to be a Trump. But I think it's really important that we know where we're at. We're coming out of an administration that very actively tried to suppress the truth. The false narrative of American exceptionalism that permeates our history directly fed into the events that took place at the Capitol. We need this administration to take the white supremacy problem seriously. And a necessary part of that is cease to celebrate false narratives in the forms of these holidays in observation. So yeah, we have a white supremacy problem, and its roots are being held in place by these holidays and observances that put forth this false narrative. And we need to continue to push and challenge the new administration to correct that narrative and tell the truth and acknowledge what has happened and take the necessary steps to work to fix this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you. Thank you, Jess, for coming on. I appreciate you. I love always hearing from you. Yes, thank you so much. Our next guest is my sister. My sister's, she is from Sioux City as well. So Jess, welcome. Please introduce yourself, titles, and your pronouns.
Hello, Jessica Lopez Walker here. I am a foster parent here in Sioux City. I'm a tribal member of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, and I've been living in Sioux City here for, I think, probably over now 20 years. But we foster Native kids. I'm open to pretty much, you know, any tribe. It doesn't matter. I'm not biased or anything like that. But I guess the one thing that we're going to talk about is Biden's promise to help out immigration, to make things and to allow especially Dreamers, DACA recipients to be able to apply for their residency. And that is something that is really meaningful to our family. My husband's a Dreamer, and for the past, I don't want to say, maybe 7-8 years, I've been doing his applications for him myself. And we don't have the money to spend on, you know, costly lawyers to be doing this when, you know, all you gotta do is read and fill it out pretty much. But there are some situations I know where you do need to get a lawyer for certain things like that. But I think with having Trump in as the president, he made it really difficult and really scary for a lot of families to try to make transitions like how we're trying to do, move from like a work permit to residency or residency to citizenship, because he just loathes anything with immigration. Anybody from not here, you're not welcomed, which I don't think anybody who doesn't have ties from here can say, you know, whether, you know, you belong or you don't belong. You know, with their imaginary boundaries, everybody on this continent, on this land, is indigenous, and we're all the same, whether we're Native, Latino, Mexican, you know, everybody, you know, down south, even Central America, we're all the same, and we should be treated the same. And people from down south, they come from, you know, different backgrounds, and sometimes there's violence involved down there where they're trying to escape from poverty. There's, you know, lack of jobs, so they do try to come here to find better lives. You know, how did everybody come here, you know, to find better lives? You know, so I don't know why they're trying to, you know, discriminate, you know, who gets to come and who gets to stay. But I think with Biden saying that he was going to do this, I think, you know, that gives a lot of people a lot of hope and happiness. I know just hearing it, it really did make us a lot, you know, it brought us a lot of happiness. And I really hope that he pulls through and actually does what he says he's going to do.
Right on.
Hopefully it's right away. That would be great. Like they say, and all everything that I've been reading about it, I know that the Dreamers are supposed to get access to apply immediately for their residency. So that's one thing that we're going to be really looking on.
How has it been for you for the past 4 years with the Trump administration?
Well, with my husband's DACA applications, you have to do it on time, you know, within a certain amount of time before it expires. And it's really nerve-wracking. And then to go down to where, you know, you have to go for your in-person appointments with immigration. You know, you never know, like they could just yank somebody out, you know, and especially with Trump being in, you know, charge, who's to say he won't, you know. And I know some people need a port of entry for their residency. And I've heard some people get permission, like you get your permit to go out of the country and be able to come back. But I've heard where people were stopped and weren't allowed back in. And that was the step that we needed to take, but we're very scared to do so because, you know, we're not trying to rip our family apart. You know, Trump might like that, but we definitely wouldn't be, you know, happy about that. We have kids, you know, we're foster parents. You know, it's not just our kids that would depend on us, but other kids as well. You know, and we lean on each other for support, you know, and everything else that comes with marriage. So it's just scary. It's like looking over your shoulder, you know, and not knowing, you know, the future.
Absolutely. I think with the Biden-Harris plan, I looked at it earlier today, and what Biden-Harris administration proposes is that they're going to make it a better way and humane way for people to come into the country, and then obviously to treat Dreamers as if they are already American citizens. I guess, like, I know, because I know your family. I don't want to throw anybody underneath the bus, so to speak. But I know that it's been challenging because you're a multiracial, you know, Native. You have different, you know. How has that been for you? Like, how has it been for you for like the past 4 months or 4 years to navigate through that?
On a personal level, I have family members that are so pro-Trump, and they'll share things that are racist towards Latinos or anybody else other than their color. And it's really disheartening because, you know, like, I'm still your family too. And like I said, I don't see where Natives and Latinos are different at all. You know, the only thing that's different between us is, you know, language, and that's only because of who colonized us. And for them to sit there and point fingers or look down upon people, I don't put up with it personally, and they all know that. So I mean, it does cause a divide, and it's sad. You know, it's really sad. You know, there's nothing you can really do about it, though. You can't change people's minds. You know, you can try, but, you know, ultimately, you know, people are pretty much stuck, you know, in a certain way of thinking, especially, you know, as they get older. So.
Right on. Thank you so much, sister, for coming on and sharing your perspective. Yes, so we're coming up on a break right now. We're just gonna show you, we're going into the second hour. So I just had the talk with my sister, Jessica Lopez Walker, about families affected by immigration. And we have Cannabis and Tribal Economic Development with Mary Jane, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives with Rosalie. Sorry if I mispronounced that. The Violence Against Women Act with Sakowis, Education and Indigenous People with Ella Driscoll, and Bridging the Digital Divide in Indian Country with Alexandria Flanders, Monuments to White Supremacy, again, Sakowis. And then lastly, we're going to close it up with Stopping the Keystone XL Pipeline. Excuse me. Sorry. Doing live streams, sometimes you get a frog in your throat. So next up, our guest is Mary Jane. And Mary Jane, please go ahead and introduce yourself, your pronouns, and any titles that you see fit.
Well, himakas katia nunam hanyo piam sit kina watis pa kai nipa tatsnich achsik oikloti token kahim yuma kalat altiwama. Just thanking our creator for gathering us all here. My name is Mary Jane Oatman, and I am a member of the Nez Perce Nation. We are Salmon people located out here in the Columbia Plateau. Our incorporated headquarters are in Idaho, but our traditional homelands span across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, where we also were avid buffalo hunters and very much had a robust rope and cordage economy, which was the economy of our matriarchs and our women's role. Our people are still very much vibrant and active in mainstream tribal politics. And so I go by she, her, or they. I'm also a member of the ACLU Board of Directors here in Idaho, where, in history, a lot of the attacks against our Two-Spirit communities at the federal level usually seem to stem from out of here. So been doing a lot of work in that area to educate my colleagues and the citizenry of our communities that was a special power role and something to be revered in tribal communities and in our indigenous kinship systems. And we see that staying very strong in our family systems, which I really think is going to help with that advocacy. So I'm the founder of the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition, and I publish Tribal Hemp and Cannabis magazine, THC. It's the nation's first magazine dedicated exclusively to all things happening within the tribal cultures and economies of hemp and cannabis rematriation. And I think that's why it's really critical with the old administration leaving and the new one coming in with the opportunities, because both Biden and Harris have been proactive in this space of cannabis legalization. One of the reasons it's super critical for our tribal communities to be involved is prior to 1492, many of us had very robust cordage economies. Many of our peace treaties were signed over sacred smoke. And so it's a reclamation for our communities, and we are doing it in the face of the green rush, another round of exploitation and a commodification of a sister plant. She's a relative of ours, and it's been really hard coming from a third generation farmer, probably way more than that, but documented where my family stopped going, breaking away from the negative stigma here in our community. And my grandmother went to federal prison in the 80s for growing marijuana here on the Nez Perce Indian Reservation, but she was never a cannabis user. She grew it as medicine for my grandfather and for many of our veterans and elders in our community. And so when our tribes were left out and only opened up for pilot operations in the Farm Bill, that's when I really started to ramp up my advocacy in our tribal community about the restoration of our women's economy as hemp rope makers. The town that I live in, it's called Kamei, and the word derives from the Indian hemp kamu. And in doing this work nationally as well as internationally, we're finding that many of our tribal communities still maintain their language systems, their connection to plant medicines, and a lot of our place names and our words derive from those gifts. And so it's so neat to hear the connection of language and the work that's being done. Even just making the connection with your sister, Jess, just before, when she kept saying about dreamers, it's hard for me not to get emotional, because that's exactly what happened to our people in 1877. We were exiled after gold was discovered in our homelands. And, the gold rush, our people are very familiar with rushes. And to this day, we're still cleaning up our traditional homelands from the exploitation of the gold rush of the 1800s. And so our treaty chiefs bargained and negotiated for our treaty, our sacred way of life, for their unborn generations in perpetuity under our sacred smoke as dreamers. The dreamer way of life was what they were protecting as our spiritual connection to our creator, because all of our chiefs know that we have such borrowed time here and we only have one contract to fulfill, and that's between ourselves and the creator. We fast forward to 2020 and everything that we experienced and witnessed as human beings. It's so amazing to see an opportunity for a reset, because we have critical legislation efforts that have been moving forward with cannabis legalization. And the MORE Act, the States Act, and the Safe Banking Act are areas where tribes can develop that critical language, work in unison and collaboration to make sure that tribal sovereignty is protected in all aspects of legalization, to make sure that when all communities and states are talking about social equity in cannabis, that the foundation of that conversation revolves around the spiritual protections of our people in the space, as well as the protection of Mother Earth, because the green rush is not what we want. And so it's been an honor to elevate tribal stories, place-based stories in this area, because decolonization of cannabis definitely needs to occur. The recognition from the bad actors, I don't know if it's going to take a whole lot of education, but we need to weed them out, all puns intended. And then we need to work in collaboration and unity with our water protectors and with our other communities working in food sovereignty, that are working in bioremediation efforts, in cleaning up their the wastelands, because it's all so interconnected. At the end of the day, we have a huge need for research and development. So our tribal colleges and universities really have a vibrant role here in the preservation and protection for our unborn generations.
That's amazing. I do want to say too that it is hard to, advocate in spaces like these, because it's hard to have that for yourself, or for the indigenous people, because there's so many people that do want to come and extract it and take the idea, and then they take it from you, and then they capitalize off of that. So I applaud you for standing up for that. I think I just want to know, like, where are you at in the process of of your work? I think this is amazing, and that this needs to be legalized. There's so many people that could be helped with this. So I just want you to recap a little bit, like, where you're at with your work. And yeah.
So today I hosted the first of many meetings, tribal national meetings. I had 88 registrants for the meeting. Not all of them could attend, but those that did were coming to the table solutions oriented. Are the highest level of folks already working in seed to sale and tech. And so that's kind of where we're at now, is realizing that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, that many of our tribal communities have stepped on these land bases and the landmines, and they need the opportunity to get in community circles, larger community circles, to have these conversations. So THC is also developing and emerging into a media company to help with branding and logoing with some of our tribal farms and facilities, because our vision is nation to nation, as well as international indigenous commerce and trade with cannabis. We have a lot to talk about when it comes to agriculture. When I heard about the egg gag earlier, I was like, oh gosh, I can't imagine something like that with cannabis. But I do know that it could happen, because we have so much advocacy to do at the local level, so much advocacy to do at our state level, and then of course at the national level. And so anything that I can help to do with my policy background, my education background to raise this conversation because, e-commerce, banking and finance, water rights, interstate travel, sovereign healthcare implementation. There's just everything is so interconnected. And so I've been building the list of our tribal subject matter experts in these fields and getting them together. And we're just going to keep growing and growing opportunities to gather. The Indigenous Cannabis Coalition, we're new. So any kind of support from other organizations like this to get the word out there is so, so, so much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We are definitely going to support this. So we do have to get rolling here. Our next guest is Rosalie. I know her as Rosie, though. That's what, hopefully, oh, hello. I was like, where is she at? Rosie, go ahead. Introduce yourself, your titles and pronouns as you see it.
Yep. So we are sketched Rosalie Fish seats the Buckleshoot Abshed. Hello, my name's Rosalie Fish, and I just introduced myself in my traditional Fulshutsi language of the Muckleshoot lands, as well as the Duwamish lands as well. I'm speaking to you from stolen land of the Lower Sioux people, the Meskwaki people, and the Iowan tribes. I'm 19 years old, and I'm an athletic advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women. In 2019, I dedicated my Washington State Championship races to 4 Indigenous women from my community. I've given multiple talks, including TED Talks, on this subject, and I use every platform I can to raise awareness towards this silent crisis. One moment, particularly in Trump's administration, that I remember very clearly is the signing of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force in 2020. Trump signed a bill of $1.5 million, and this amount was actually lowered from the original by the Trump administration, and we knew that this was not long enough to last barely a year when it came to the underfunding. Not only with this, but a problem that has lasted for centuries and a crisis that was formed over centuries cannot be solved lazily within a year. What we really need is complete and systematic reform. A few of the problems, also along with underfunding when it came to the task force, was also, in the words of Deb Haaland and Abigail Echohawk, was not only underfunded, but it cut out the voices of local and tribal law enforcement, it cut out the voices of survivors, and it cut out the voices of the victims' families. Another problem that was mentioned by both Deb Haaland and Abigail Echohawk is that this task force was not made mandatory by any means for any state to practice, and as well as it cut out urban natives, even though we make up about 75% of the Indigenous population in the United States. Another reason that this task force was not effective and not what we needed was particularly shown in the blocking of the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, which would have most benefited the victims and families of the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis. And with that, I would just like to clarify that this task force, it needs people from all parts of the country, of all nations within the over 500 in the United States. The Trump administration previously failed to record national crime database to track missing and murdered Indigenous women cases, which means the Trump administration used missing and murdered Indigenous women to attempt to gain Native votes. And with this, I would like to say that we are done with performative activism. We are done with quick fixes that dissolve over 2 years. The Native vote, particularly the Navajo and Dine people in Arizona and New Mexico, flipped that area blue for Biden. And now it's time for Biden to make reparations for the people who allowed him this privilege.
I definitely thank you for coming on and sharing that. Yes, missing and murdered Indigenous women. It has been an epidemic since, like I always say, like the dawn of colonization. I know that you had mentioned that you are a runner and you run to raise awareness. Can you tell me what goes through your mind when you're going through these races? I participated in a in a run myself, and it was I had to take it spiritual. I mean, that's the only way you can really take it. But I wanted you to share kind of like what goes through your head while you're running.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if anything, especially the first time I ran for Indigenous women, I was extremely overwhelmed. And it was so much more painful than just like the normal average running that I normally did. And now that I've ran for relatives a few times, what I really do is I just anticipate that heaviness, and I accept it, because there's no other way that anyone could feel for running for missing and murdered Indigenous women. It is a heavy, upsetting, frustrating, and honestly, it's a crisis that evokes your grief. And I think there's no other way to look at it. And so I really just accept and acknowledge that this is the way that I should be feeling, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then I really try to focus on my self-care, especially my spiritual self-care when it comes to like my Native traditions, and that's kind of how I am able to keep doing this.
Right on. Thank you, Rosalie. Now our next guest coming up is going to be Sakowis herself to talk about what Rosalie was just talking about as far as the Violence Against Women Act. Christine or Sakowis, would you like to indulge us with that?
Thank you for the introduction. Again, yeah, we thought it was important that we add a little bit of info here about the Violence Against Women Act, because it is a federal legislation that has a huge effect on Indigenous peoples, immigrants, and LGBTQIA folks, actually. It's a 25-year-old act that Biden actually co-wrote. And it's been steamrolled pretty badly the past 3 years, I believe. 2018 is when it needed to be reauthorized, and it didn't get reauthorized. Trump just let it sit there, along with Mitch McConnell, actually, in what is called Mitch McConnell's graveyard, because the administration at the time, I want to say current administration, but as of today, it's the past administration. They didn't want to pass it because advocates were trying to close what's called the boyfriend loophole, that creates a larger sweep of who is considered to be a domestic violence or an abuser. And so, before it was really a very black and white kind of definition, somebody that lives in your household with you, and, that's considered a spouse, common law, or, it could be a familial as well, like children and adult, and parents as well. But what this does is it disallows people with this type of record to purchase a gun. And that widened it to also people that are acquaintances and boyfriends that aren't living. And the NRA didn't like that. I consider the NRA to be a domestic terrorist organization, and they lobbied heavily against one of the most profound pieces of legislation that has come through this country in a long time, that decreased domestic violence by about 60% since it was inaugurated. It was kind of a big deal. It went from a definition of this for what is domestic violence to a definition of this. And Trump took away that definition. He put it back to this, and then just let it sit there. It didn't even appoint he only had an acting officer for this division for a long time, for the whole time, and there was never anybody put in place permanently. And So like what this does is it's one of the only pieces of legislation that actually allows tribal people to try people in their own court systems. Now, mind you, that's a really flawed system as well, because there's very few court systems that are considered, adequate to do so. But, it's a really important part of our sovereignty, because, it allows us to, look at these perpetrators that are coming like from outside, like of our territories, outside of our reservations, outside of our, our lands, and put them, and prosecute them. It also added protections for immigrant women, because of course we know that they're vulnerable to people taking advantage of them, because of their status in this country, and to LGBTQIA people, who, as we all know, face added violence and threats from people in this country. We all know that Black trans women in particular have been facing, just terrible threats, and really disturbing deaths across this country. And that also applies to brown, trans people as well, and trans people in general. It's a really scary thing. And so that's why the Violence Against Women Act is really important, and we need to continue to fund it. And I hope that with this incoming administration, with Biden, being, the new president, that he will get this passed right away, because reauthorized, because there's just too much infighting going on between there was too much infighting going on between the House and the Senate and the different parties about, added protections, because the NRA has such a death grip essentially on politicians, giving them grades, failing grades if they supported the Violence Against Women Act, which is absolutely disturbing to me in so many ways. And this is why we need it passed as well, so that we can show domestic terror organizations like the NRA that they can't win. We need to do everything in our power to overcome people like that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I just want to kind of put some it's always put statistics out. Sorry, I'm having a hard time saying that, but I think it's 1 in 2 women will experience some kind of sexual assault, rape, domestic violence is a huge thing. So it's not only, so we deal with a lot of things. We have a lot of layers, and I think it's important to also talk about, like our male relatives, like, I want our male relatives to kind of step up and own that and help us, help their women out. And it's not to say that all Native women or all Native men are like that. It's just, we're setting this this narrative, especially, it's just time for that to be addressed, and it's time for men to really step up and protect their women, the life givers. So I just wanted to share that kind of that aspect of things.
It's hard to say sometimes,
Yeah, no, it is. It's very hard.
How domestic violence is in our communities, but it's very high. And the reason it's high is because our men have been emasculated, and they're basically like they're set off. They're set out of our society, settler descendant society. And we just have so much pain and historical trauma from what's happened for the past 500 years. So we have a lot of healing to do, and that's why VAW was important, because it provides millions and millions of dollars every year to tribal nations, so that they can actually put on programming and support groups for these exact situations.
Right on. Thank you, Sakawis. Our next guest is Ella Driscoll, and she is going to be presenting education and Indigenous peoples. Ella, thank you for being here. If you would like to introduce yourself, your pronouns and titles as you see fit.
Awesome. My name is Ella Driscoll, and I'm from Meskwaki, from Wolf Clan, and I'm also from Winnebago Nation. I think it's important to start the Native education discussion with recognizing that the Western educational system began for Native people as a systemic genocidal tool that was used to erase Native culture and identity through forced assimilation in Native boarding schools. Since the onset of Native boarding schools, stereotypes, propaganda, and whitewash perspectives of Native people have been set inside primary school systems throughout the country. As a white passing Meskwaki, I first experienced the effects of this when I was 8 years old in my public school classroom. And I told one of my classmates that I was Native, and they laughed at me and told me that all Natives are dead because you only see them in cartoons or on old Western films. And things didn't really improve as I grew up. And in fact, like, you know, even living in Iowa, most people are shocked to learn that they live 30 miles away from a Native settlement. So the ignorance from public school is just so prevalent and widespread. After high school, though, I was really privileged to be able to go to a Native college in New Mexico, the Institute of American Indian Arts. While I was there, our school experienced extremely high rates of dropout from our freshman and sophomore students, ultimately because they just didn't feel supported. From my view, a lot of college freshmen take a semester, if not the entire year, to adjust to their new independence, the demands of their new college classes, and of course, like the culture shock for Native students. And a lot of students had a really hard time their first and second semesters, and they got discouraged. And a huge difference I like to reflect on between the average middle class Euro-American college student and a Native college student is that often, you know, if you mess up a little bit your first semester, maybe you don't get all A's, and maybe if you don't do the best, you could lose your scholarship. You could lose your access to higher education from just adjusting to college. You know, you don't have a lot of people with Plan B financial backup. So the discouragement of being unable to pay for tuition, being far from home, and being almost completely isolated from their traditional cultural practices leads to a lot of major dropout rates in college students for Native people. Today, I currently work for the Native Center for Behavioral Health, where we provide resources and support to Native community programs, working with mental health, addiction, prevention programs, and other program grants. Over the course of the pandemic, we've held spaces for Native school professionals. And from these sessions, we've seen that Native youth across the country have experienced education devastation from this pandemic. Internet connection, technology access like iPads and computers, and general teacher availability issues have been exacerbated to the point where I've heard stories of students sitting outside the school parking lot for every day for 7 hours a day just to be able to have access to their classes. And Biden has promised to tackle these 3 issues I've talked about, putting Native history and culture into public school education, investing $20 billion of Wi-Fi infrastructure to Native households, and making public and tribal universities and colleges tuition-free for families, like Native families, in that financial line. And when I read that, I felt so hopeful for one of the first times, you know, not only in the past 4 years, but just since I've, you know, been in school. So my hope is, you know, the current administration will fight and uphold these promises for Native youth and upcoming generations that are fighting for a better future for themselves and their communities, and implementing these changes that are proposed and the other ones even discussed here tonight by all of these amazing speakers here tonight. They affect everyone, not just Native people, and create the kind of cultural and societal change that we really need in our country and in our communities that will last for decades. So I just want to finish off by saying thank you for you all for being here tonight, showing up your communities, and supporting this space that we're in. So, Gadabi.
Thank you, Ella. Oh gosh, that was such a great. I'm glad that you had mentioned digital, like digital technology. Our next guest speaker, who is Alex Flanders, or Alexandria. She is going to actually talk about the digital divide, or bridging the digital divide in Indian country. And Alexandria, thank you for being here. If you would like to introduce yourself, pronouns, and any titles that you see fit.
Hinikaragiwina, I greet you. Good evening. My name is Alexandria Flanders, and I'm an enrolled citizen of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. However, I also have ties to the Oglala Sioux and the Meskwaki. My name in my language is Shakshepchijinga, which means Golden Eagle Woman. Currently, I'm a student at the University of Nebraska-Omaha, and I'm studying creative nonfiction, Native American studies, and tribal emergency management. For the last few years, on and off, I've been staying in the dorms at my school during the fall and spring semesters. Often I return back to the place I was raised. It's my homeland, which is the Winnebago Indian Reservation, 80 miles north of Omaha, Nebraska, and 20 miles south of Sioux City, Iowa. When the pandemic first started up, I was getting ready to go to the Virgin Islands for spring break to learn about the indigenous people and how they handle their emergencies that are unfamiliar to us up here in the Midwest. Our trip was postponed within days because of the virus, and we never learned about the emergency management systems they have in place. I stayed in the dorms for a little while after that, but out of a strong feeling of being homesick and lonely, I moved back to the reservation. I stayed there until this fall semester started back up, and that's when I moved back into the dorms. But while I was on the reservation, I took online classes throughout the summer, and I worked 2 jobs completely online as well. Over the summer, doing everything entirely online, I found it challenging to get work done, and my home environment on the reservation wasn't the best. Neither was my internet connection. There are times where I wouldn't be able to turn my homework in or get anything done at all whatsoever because my internet wasn't stable. You could probably blame it on the several people in my household sucking up all the Wi-Fi on their phones or video games. But people will tell you to pay more internet on the bill or pay more money on the internet bill to get better access to the Wi-Fi. In my case, the money that I was making wasn't enough to pay for better Wi-Fi. And sometimes when we would have extra money left over, we wouldn't put it on an upgrade. We'd buy a new internet router, which would work sometimes. But it was only a matter of time until it started becoming slow again. I know I'm not the only person who struggled with this back on the reservation. One night, I ended up disconnecting from the internet over 20 times while taking one of my final exams. I was able to get my exam done, thankfully, but to a professor, it may look like I was cheating or trying to hack into the system to get the answers. The point I'm trying to make here is that while we're in this pandemic, we're going to need more materials to make sure that everyone is able to complete their tasks. The main thing I'm talking about is supplying everybody with 5G internet on the reservations. The reason why I say this is not because of my story, but because a lot of us have jobs that have moved from being in person and they're online entirely in this pandemic. And when we don't have good Wi-Fi, we're not able to get our things done. Not only that, but if one person gets the coronavirus, how are we supposed to communicate with the people in our households? I got sick with the virus in May of last year, and I was in quarantine for the entire time that I was sick. There were times that I couldn't let a person in my household know that I needed food or water because I didn't want to risk other people getting sick as well. And that's because my internet wasn't working. I didn't want to risk letting other people get sick. And I'm thankful that I'm young and healthy and I was able to recover fast enough and wait longer than other people. But although many people didn't think having internet is necessary, I would disagree with them, especially when we're living in this pandemic that we are now. Many of our youth right now are attending classes online without a stable internet connection. These students are missing out on their education and knowledge. Right now, they're missing out on a lot of opportunities for social interaction as well. So let's do better for them. Let's provide them with the tools they need to know or need to learn. My school, UNO, recognized this issue and did their best to accommodate their students. They provided digital hotspots to help the students with unstable internet connections and make sure they get their homework done. I'm not saying let's send everybody home with digital hotspots, but I'm saying let's do our best to make sure everyone can access the internet and make sure that it's running well to get our tasks done. So let's do better. Let's help out each other. Pinikiki.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so in addition to not only just internet access, Biden-Harris administration is also looking to do improving housing. I think there's other infrastructures too as well. Our next guest is Sakawis again, and she is going to be presenting on abolishing monuments, mascots to white supremacy. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I forgot that. I'm back here like doing all the controls, by the way, as we do this. So I, abolishing monuments and, and mascots and all that, imagery to, white supremacy is a highly important task within this country and the world, actually. And, we've taken that on for a few years here already in Iowa as Great Plains Action Society. And, in February, we actually, co-hosted an event here where we, wanted to shed light on a particular monument that bothers people like us that are often at the Capitol having to speak in front of it. It's of, an Indian, sitting, down at the feet of two settlers that are looking westward. And it doesn't actually have a name, but the description is about, it says that it's a friendly Indian showing the way to two, settlers to find their new home, which is, really disturbing and obviously, a falsity. And so if you go into the Iowa Capitol building as well, there's this 40-foot wide mural and it's 25, 30 feet high. And it's the actual depiction of the Doctrine of Discovery, westward expansion or Manifest Destiny. It's that depiction. And it's super disturbing. And it's, it's got even Columbia, who is, in my opinion, an actual goddess of, Americans and American patriots who would never want to admit that, but, because they believe in Jesus, right? But so we feel that it's highly important that we get legislation in place to actually remove all monuments to white supremacy, murals, mascots, names, what have you, that falsifies history, whitewashes history, and creates a narrative that is dangerous and hostile to Indigenous and Black and Latinx and Asian American and Muslim folks, everybody that's basically not white in this country that's been oppressed. In particular, as Indigenous peoples, we face probably a lot of these monuments are basically an ode to our demise. And I consider this to actually be I consider this to be hate speech, to be honest. This is outright hate speech in our public spaces, and we have to remove it because I don't feel welcome in spaces that are mocking and hiding and celebrating the genocide of my people. And so we wrote a letter to legislator Abdul Samad, where we started the process of getting legislation written where we don't have to actually put our bodies on the line as brown and Black folks, because we know this past summer with the BLM uprising, people were shot, people were hurt very badly, and Trump threatened to put these folks in jail for up to 10 years for removing these monuments to white supremacy. And so we have a real task at hand in order to do this. You all know, I'm sure, about what happened this past summer as well with the Redskins. And the owner is so stubborn that he actually refused to provide a new mascot. It's now just called the Washington team, or I don't know what they're called, but right.
I don't think they know.
and there's many more to go. And then even here in Iowa with our work, I'm constantly getting messages and emails from folks in different parts of the state that are like, hey, guess what? In my area, there's a little league team called the Indians, or the Warriors. There's a stream or a park that's called Squaw Creek or Squaw Park, and just in general, it's just really disturbing to think that people actually think it's okay, to keep these names around. And so, we're on our way to working on our own piece of legislation here in Iowa, and we're going to demand that, this kind of change take place so that we can feel welcome, like literally on our own lands. I am not necessarily I'm Plains Cree Saulteaux, but, I like to think my people jaunted down here because we're Plains people. And then, this is like Trisha's, land. This is Meskwaki territory. It's Iowa territory. How dare they? We would like to see in place of that one racist statue I was describing earlier, a piece of art created by Lance Foster, the tribal historian of the Iowa, put in its place, which is a beautiful piece that he drew of a woman, working in the fields, and she has a corn skirt, and it just basically is a much better symbolism of what the state actually was about before colonial farming practices ripped it apart and made it the most biologically colonized state in the country. So we feel that this is a much better symbol of type of practice, the type of way that we should be on this land, because Iowa is very polluted because of big ag and corporate farming here, and we want this to be a symbol of the change we're trying to make, rather than a symbol. We don't want these symbols of the demise of our people and the demise of our land. And we hope that with new symbology, we can inspire people to be in these spaces rather than make them feel like they're part of the past.
Thank you, Sakawis. Our next guest, I'm so excited. Oh, I've been so busy in the past 6 months. So, Mahmoud, oh, I love it. How are you? How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you doing, Mahmoud?
I'm doing all right. Pretty good today, actually. Good to hear the news from the new president.
Yes. So Mahmoud is here to present on stopping the KXL pipeline. Mahmoud, if you would like to introduce yourself, your pronouns, and any titles that you see fit.
All right. First of all, I'll start out. Salam la, men Mahmoud Fitil, men karamla, karam tataraman, tatarulu tatarban. I say peace to all of you friends and relatives. My name is Mahmoud Fitil. I'm Kram Tatar. An indigenous people from Crimea, over here on Turtle Island, joining with the relatives struggling for indigenous sovereignty and cleaner future, struggling for the future generations. Been struggling against KXL since probably 2008, and picked up with DAPL, went up to Chetty Camp, struggled with his relatives over in Iowa. Back met Sakawis back, she was working with indigenous Iowa. I've been struggling with our relative Trisha over there as well. And I was really disappointed when President Trump, through executive order, brought KXL back in 2017. Quick overview here. 2008, TransCanada came back on the scene. They proposed this project right after they completed a Keystone project. What has happened here is that we fought it and we got it blocked actually by the Obama administration. And like we had mentioned, first order of Donald Trump was to go ahead and bring that back in 2017, right after, I guess on December 4th, 2016, everybody remembers, we thought that we had beat DAPL. It turned out to be a rope-a-dope. And that was another piece of Trumpian legislature where they went ahead and pushed that through anyway. It's actively being contested by a Cheyenne River Sioux tribal lawyer here, and actually resides in Omaha as well, Miss Nikki DeShano, and they're still working at it. Turns out the Army Corps of Engineers erred in their permitting, fast track permit 12, and that's actively being challenged. There are 3 different options. They're going to go ahead and contest that and trying to get that pipeline shut down as well. So we support those relatives in that efforts. Our situation here with Keystone XL, they went ahead and pushed forward, tried to get that through during all 4 years of the Trump nightmare, as we like to call it here. And we fought it every step of the way, you know, picked up right where we left off. Made a lot of relationships amongst relatives throughout the Great Plains, a lot of Lakota relatives, Dakota relatives, throughout the Lakota Mokoche up there and the Dakotas. This project starts out in Harditzy, Alberta, and the tar sands patch, boreal forests are clear cut. They scoop out through open pit mining, and they send this tar sands down, cut it with a bunch of chemical additives, and they try to pipe it down through Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska, where it joins up with the existing Keystone project that was completed in 2010. We call it the zombie pipeline. I think that actually young Jimmy Hale was the first person to comment in a public comment hearing, and Joy Braun continued that tradition by calling it the zombie pipeline, because it was brought back from the dead. You know, it was actually killed by the Obama administration. It's worth noting that TransCanada actually brought that back and sued us as the United States for $15 billion once they canceled that permit under the North American Free Trade Agreement. That was, they claimed future profits lost. Again, the Lakota treaties of Fort Laramie are in violation, and that was the treaty tribal rights that the Lakota nations were using to fight this in court. Was a touchy subject. It's something that violates treaty. The project is dangerous, threatens the water intake outlets, or inlets rather, of the Cheyenne River, Fort Peck Indian reservations up there in Montana, down in South Dakota, the Rosebud Reservation, Yankton Reservation, comes down into Nebraska. Again, it threatens the Ogallala Aquifer down the whole span. Our role here in Nebraska primarily, we've been scouting the line. We went out with Trisha a few times, and again, the full brunt of the state came down upon us. A couple of us were even visited by the FBI out here, trying to go ahead and prevent our citizen overwatch, I guess. You know, people standing up, tribal nations, indigenous folks standing up, trying to protect the future generations and make treaties stand. You know, make the American government stand up and you know, abide by that treaty that their ancestors signed, and observe treaty rights, honor those treaties. Every step of the way, we met them. You know, both in the courts, in public hearings, in the Army Corps of Engineers. We also met them in the streets. You know, we went out, we protested, we held rallies, we held actions. We had two indigenous relatives are currently facing criminal charges. One of them, a young Cheyenne River relative by the name of Jaslyn Charger. She actually locked down to a pump station up in Cheyenne River. They're doing what they like to call pre-construction because they don't have a permit, all of the permits necessary to do full construction. And she was arrested, and she's facing 1 year in jail and $2,000 charge. And then when relatives went to the arraignment, they faced they went ahead and they ensnared another relative there at the arraignment, and that relative is facing 16 years on a number of trumped up charges. The South Dakota law enforcement went ahead and went onto the Cheyenne River reservation several times. That's technically illegal. Just goes to show the continued insult to indigenous nations by both the state authorities as well as the federal authorities. All along the way, you know, it's insult to injury. First of all, there's lack of regard for indigenous lives through threatening the drinking water. There's a lack of regard for Americans as well, and threatening 16 million people's drinking water. Goes through, I don't know, a lot of the white folks get upset about property rights. For us, that's not really as big of a concern as treaty rights and drinking water concerns, but also, concerns for climate change and what we're leaving behind for the future generations. We don't really look at it like, what is it? They say often that we're borrowing from the future generations, and we got to be concerned what we're leaving behind for them. We've been struggling all along the way. We've taken to observing and documenting them working, catching them in few instances where they were working illegally without permits. We've taken to a few tactics where we're flying drones and catching them, documenting them working illegally up in South Dakota. And that actually got us a federal injunction against TransCanada, which slowed them down considerably. They were ordered to cease working because of some of that footage an Ogallala relative actually got. So in cooperation with some Rosebud relatives out there. So again, it's important for tribal members and for plain everyday folks to be watching these people. They work under assumed authority and assumed responsibility, or assumed, permission. They like to make it seem like everything that they're doing is okay and it's all right and it's approved, when in fact it's not. Their motives are profit over people, and it's our job as individuals and Indigenous folks to stand up to that and to reassert the authority. And people often talk about sovereignty. Well, nobody's going to give you sovereignty. The way that you achieve sovereignty is you act sovereign. You assert those rights. You get out there and you contest them, you challenge them. We're very happy today at 5:15 Eastern time. Joe Biden came through and he followed through on a commitment that he made prior to his election. And he went ahead and he rescinded that permit that was given to him, or that was granted to TransCanada by Donald Trump. And now they're looking to recoup some losses by selling off that pipe as scrap. So we're very pleased. We're hearing a lot of wopalas being shouted out across Lakota territories. It's sort of a bittersweet win because they are also continuing to build Line 3 up in Anishinaabe territories in Minnesota. And we haven't forgot about those relatives. A lot of these resources, a lot of our folks are going to be heading up that way to support those relatives up there. So it's a struggle here, some good news, and for now we'll take it, we'll take it and we'll run with it. People are still working against DAPL, still no DAPL, stop Line 3, and retire Line 5 is the word. KXL, Line 3 and Line 5 are all tar sands pipelines. Alberta tar sands patch is up there in Hardisty, Alberta. It's a western, almost Canadian province. Relatives up there also facing TMX, that's Trans Mountain Pipeline. It was nationalized, of course, under the Trudeau administration. Conahoe, Manuel, and the relatives up there holding down. And they're also actively fighting that pipeline. So we got to start looking at these things as large projects, and we're all fighting the same monster. And it's kind of back to the colonization. They like to divide and conquer us, and like, oh, we got to win against KXL. Well, they're still building Line 3. They refuse to stop Line 5. Recently the Mission governor ordered, and the Attorney General ordered the Enbridge to shut down and decommission Line 5, 65-year-old pipe resting at the bottom of the Mackinac Straits, and Enbridge flat out said no. They refused. Well, we'll see about that. But for now, we'll take the KXL win, we'll put the pressure on Line 5, and we'll go join the frontline resistance against Line 3. And Indigenous power doesn't give up.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you for coming on here. We really appreciate it.
Oh, we appreciate you.
I added myself to the stream so the three of us have a little celebration.
Yay!
Yay!
Yeah.
I particularly
it really is.
Because Mahmoud has been on the ground in Nebraska for years. Thank you, Mahmoud.
Yeah.
Yes.
Say hi to the kids.
I know. You see us? I see you.
No pipeline.
Yeah, I know. Let's hope that Biden also keeps the twinning of DAPL out of our sight as well, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. We'll see though, like I said, we'll see in the future, you know, what else can come. You know, I'm still kind of hesitant. I don't want to obviously get my eggs all in a basket here, but we'll see what happens in the future. That's all I can say, is that we have to keep pressure on the Biden administration. So,
Well, Trisha, you were there with me. We were watching them bring it in on the train. We'll be there watching them when they take it out.
I hope so. All right. Yeah, so I just wanted to close out really quickly. I didn't know, Sakawis, if you had anything that you wanted to conclude with.
No, I don't. I'm just imagining all of these, you know, pipeline workers and the feds and all that with, you know, their surveillance now, like watching as they, you know, how they watch as they come in with their drones and they watch as it goes out as well with all the surveillance. So they can watch it come in and now they can watch it go out.
Right on. All right. Well, I'm going to kind of conclude this closing statement here. So historically, the first 100 days of the new presidency is a pledge to the American people that they have what it takes to make foreseeable change right away. We are committed to challenge this administration to do just that because we deserve solutions now. 2020 was a year to never forget. The world stopped upon the discovery of COVID-19, yet social injustice continued to increase and inflict harm everywhere. In the US, incited by the death of George Floyd and a fascist government, the Black community and allies all over the country rose up and fought back, even though the danger of COVID, because of the threat from white supremacist violence, just as pressing. Trump's endless encouragement of white supremacy fueled the flames that took the lives of so many BIPOC brothers and sisters. Alongside that, the ongoing inequities such as housing, job, and food insecurity increased immensely due to a government that is unfit to take care of its people during a pandemic. Recognizing the scary direction of the Trump presidency towards dictatorship and fascism, many communities, organizations, tribal nations, and individuals worked relentlessly to get out the vote in BIPOC and left-leaning communities. Great Plains Action Society was one of those organizations, and though we were underpaid, stressed, and fed up, we did all what we could do to get Trump out of office and are exuberantly happy to see him go. However, we must never forget that this country is intrinsically founded upon slavery, genocide, and land theft. We are now in a time where we need to hold the next administration to the fire. Is the incoming administration still plagued by white supremacy? Yes. Do we need to hold them accountable for the next 4 years? Absolutely. We don't need any more BIPOC folks to die or face imprisonment for the sake of social justice, the climate, and the environment. Join Great Plains Action Society in demanding that Biden keeps his promises during his first 100 days in office, but most importantly, create legislation that puts an end to the white supremacist institutions. With that, thank you so much for joining tonight, and be on the lookout. Be tuned in.
Have a good night.